Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. So it's actually a pretty interesting week again for the market in both Standard and Modern. In Standard, a couple weeks ago, we saw the rise of the Mardu Vehicles decks, and as predicted, last weekend we saw a backlash to that, and that was the counter to those decks being the Golgari decks. We saw different variants of the Golgari decks come out. We saw the energy version, the aggro version, the delirium version, but they were all really hot this past week. Now, as far as competitive play or high-level competitive play goes, this week Standard's taking a little time off. The meta will digest a little bit, but we're going into two major Modern GPs. So Modern is definitely going to feel an impact this week as well. You'll see that in the market as folks are trying to assemble their decks, or perhaps their sideboards in some cases that deal with what they think the meta is going to be. But I do caution you, I think after this weekend, we're going to see some big changes in Modern depending on what happens over the course of the weekend. And Legacy still kind of being Legacy with some interesting spikes and some other cards that are in decline. We'll look at those quickly as well. Having said that, before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a link to our Amazon affiliate store. Any purchases you make through any of the links, whether it be singles, sealed product, what have you, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. That's always appreciated. Thank you to everybody who's participated in that. And also, you'll find a link to our Patreon page, another great way to help support us and help us keep making these videos. And we've recently updated that page, so check it out for details on how to get one of these classic art Heroes and Legends exclusive Angel tokens like you see on the screen here. All right, let's talk about the cards. We're going to start off with Standard. Top 5 cards that lost value this week, coming in at number 5. A Johnny Unyielding, down 69 cents this week to 641. Now, we've talked about this card for a number of weeks in a row at this point, and yes, it's ticking down little by little. And like I said in the past, I feel like this card really did its job, considering it's a 6 casting cost Planeswalker that's 2 mana on color. This isn't a card that is going to see 4-ofs in decks or anything like that. This found a home in the Selesnya Tokens deck. The only thing awkward about that is that deck seems to have been overshadowed a little bit by the other 3 major decks right now in the meta. However, I think it's still a successful deck. I think it could rebound at any time, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it like just take down a tournament out of nowhere. So don't count that deck out. Now the deck runs 1 or 2 of these, so again, this isn't going to be a huge financial card, especially as more packs get open. I see this settling in maybe around $4 to $7, depending on the success of the Selesnya deck going forward. But at this point, let it drop a little more. If you're interested in picking up copies for whatever reason, I think you'll be able to get this card cheaper in a few weeks. Coming in at number 4 is Herald of Anguish, down 72 cents to 717. Another card that's been ticking down pretty gradually, and it just never found its home in the meta. It has a high power level. Players were very optimistic about this card, and still are to some degree, because I think that it has hope for the future. Maybe after Amonkhet comes out and Standard changes a little bit, there's a chance this card could eventually find its foothold. But until then, it's going to keep declining, and I have no doubt you'll be able to pick these things up for probably just a couple dollars very, very soon. Coming in number 3 is a Johnny Valiant Protector, down 73 cents to 628. These are always interesting, these Planeswalker deck cards, because there are folks out there that collect Planeswalkers or just want to pick them up for casual play or Commander, or maybe their cube or something like that. They're readily available. I mean, you can go to any LGS and pick these decks up for $12, $15. You can go to Target, you can go to Walmart and get them. I mean, they're everywhere. But a lot of times they see a boost in the secondary market upon pre-release time and during the release season, because folks just don't want to buy the whole deck and they're maybe buying other singles. So they just go ahead and throw this in their cart and call it a day. And it gets sort of this odd inflation to it that isn't probably super accurate. So what you're seeing here is this card continues to tick down. It will continue to tick down. Basically, the market kind of gets flooded with these particular cards. Coming in at number 2, Tezzeret the Schemer, down 88 cents to 939. Much like the card we talked about a few moments ago, the power level is here for sure. This card will see Standard play. It's just a matter of time. It needs more support cards around it to find its place in the meta. It just hasn't taken hold in this current meta. I have no doubt there's going to be more support coming with Amonkhet, especially since that particular block is going to focus on Nicol Bolas, and Tezzeret, of course, being close to Bolas, I feel like there's going to be some synergies coming for this card. So again, let it tick down a little bit. You can probably pick up copies of this card for maybe closer to $6 or $7 within a few weeks here. But when you can get it cheap, I would pick up some copies. And coming in at number 1, Saheeli Rai, down $1.89 to $17.41. So here's the deal with this card. It spiked really hard a few weeks ago leading up to the Pro Tour when there was a lot of excitement around the copycat combo. Now the Pro Tour happened, Mardu Vehicles kind of wrecked that deck, but that was because it was metagamed against, basically, because it was so popular and potentially so powerful. Now we've seen the Golgari decks take the Mardu Vehicles decks down a notch, which means I do think that the copycat decks are really poised to make a comeback over the next few weeks. Having said that, you got to remember, though, there's been a lot of packs of Kaladesh opened, and this card spiked really hard and had a little bit of unnatural inflation due to the hype around that combo prior to the Pro Tour. So this card, I think, will continue to come down, but at the same time, it's still going to see standard play. I don't see it bottoming out. I feel like this is a $12 to $15 card that will probably be more of a fair price for it going forward. All right, let's look at the cards that have gained value this week. Like I said at the top of the show, we're going to see a lot of Golgari cards here. Verder's Gearhulk being the first one, up 36 cents to $19.97. Now, a couple of these cards also fit into the Selesnya build as well, which is kind of nice if they have that crossover. But the reason the attention's truly on these cards this week is because of the Golgari decks. Whether it's the Energy version, the Aggro version, or the Delirium version, they were all very popular. Coming in number 4, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, up 46 cents to $2.39. I'm glad to see this card working out. During the pre-release time when this was first spoiled, I just felt like this could potentially be a great aggro card. Seems to be panning out, and it is going up. Still very affordable, though. So if you don't have your copies of this and you're thinking you may want to play Golgari at some point during the season, I would pick these up now. I think this is going to keep going up. Coming in number 3 is Nissa Voice of Zendikar, up 46 cents to $13.75. So with the new meta, originally this card just fell naturally into Selesnya tokens, but now as we evolve a little bit further, this card is showing up in those Golgari decks as well. So another really versatile card that always seems to find its foothold in Standard. Number 2 is Grasp of Darkness, up 47 cents to $1.99. This isn't uncommon. It's very affordable. Now, a lot of packs of Oath were opened, so it's not going to go up super high or anything like that, but it is a key piece of removal in these Golgari decks. It's definitely getting some attention this week. And Fatal Push, you won't see that on the list this time around, but it is relatively steady, holding in the high $4 range, even though more and more packs are still being opened. And coming in number 1 is Tireless Tracker, up 55 cents to $8.78. Again, a key component to these Golgari decks. All right, let's talk about Modern. So, a few things here. Folks are preparing for a big weekend of Modern. You can definitely see that reflected in the market. There's been a lot of cards that started to get purchased and started to get a little bit scarce on the marketplace. We saw a pretty big spike last weekend, and we'll talk more about that in just a few moments. But let's look at the cards that lost value first. Coming in at number 5 is Jace Vryn's Prodigy, down $1.79 to $35.99. Now, Jace does see Modern play. Jace sees actually a lot of Frontier play, but I think Jace spiked when there was a lot of focus and a lot of talk about Frontier about a month or two ago. And that just became sort of a hot topic, and it turned a lot of people's attention to Jace. Right now, I think the folks that were playing Frontier are still playing Frontier, but it's not in the news as much. So because of that, I think Jace will continue to creep down at this point a little bit. Coming in number 4 is Retract, down $1.99 to $12.66. And this was one of the first spikes, really, from the Pure Steel Paladin movement that started a few weeks ago. So this is starting to normalize a little bit, but the jury's going to be out on the Pure Steel Paladin deck until the end of the weekend. The deck really needs to put up a good showing at one of these 2 GPs, and you want to see, hopefully, a few copies in the top 8s between the 2 of them for this deck to continue to flourish. If it falls flat this weekend, that could be the end of this deck, and you may see some of these cards start to plummet. Coming in at number 3 is Liliana of the Val, down $2.24 to $92.55. So Modern Masters 2017 is coming. It's right around the corner. No cards have officially been spoiled or leaked yet. However, it's pretty safe to say, I can't imagine this card will not be in the set, right? Like, if there's one card that's a lock that you know is going to be there, I think it's going to be this one. I can't imagine that they would say, okay, we're going to include Innistrad block now in Modern Masters and not put this card in. I mean, folks would be furious. So it will be there. Of course, it will be a Mythic, and more copies will be introduced in the market. Now, the reason this is especially soft, I think, a couple of reasons. First off, we know it's coming pretty much, right? And you don't want to spend $90, $100 on this card right now when you know there's going to be reprints. Secondly, it does appear that, at least over the years, the print run for the Masters sets has increased. So if that trend continues, we're likely to see more of this product in the marketplace than any other Masters set prior to it. And that could really start to have a larger impact, at least temporarily, on some of these card values. Now, the weird effect Masters has on some of these formats like Modern, in the past we've seen this, is it introduces more cards, prices go down for a little bit, but when those prices go down, more people get interested, and then there's more competition for the cards that are out there, and eventually in the long run they actually start going up higher than where they were to begin with. Now, if there's more increased product, that might not be the case again necessarily, or at least not to the same level, but it is something to watch in the future. But long story short, at least right now, especially as we're speculating on a lot of stuff, these big ticket cards are going to be very soft right now for the time being. Coming in number 2 is Bloom Tender, down 234 to 3163. So this one's pretty much a commander card. I mean, it's a big commander card. It's an Eventide rare, and whenever you find rares that are popular from that block in particular, they tend to be a little pricey because the print run was much lower during that time. However, the reason this is on our radar this week is because about 2 months ago or so, Saffron Olive from MTG Goldfish did a brew with this card. It got a lot of people's attention. I mean, he does some really awesome brews. Check them out if you haven't seen them in the past, or try to follow what he does on his website, because they're really cool. Sometimes great budget decks he puts out, a lot of different really creative things. And people really notice what he puts out there, and it can impact the market very quickly at times. So this is a card that a couple months ago was in one of those brews. It spiked at that time, and now it's just stabilizing back down a little bit. And coming in at number 1, the big card from last week, this is the Meriden version, Chalice of the Void, down $405 to $63. Now, of course, with the Modern GPs approaching, as they're going to be starting this weekend, a lot of folks were thinking about that Pure Steel Paladin deck and how popular it is. A lot of people picking up cards to put that together. So the folks that weren't playing that deck wanted to think of a sideboard strategy. This card basically is the sideboard strategy that could potentially just take that deck out. So because of that, a lot of folks started picking these up on the marketplace, and TCG Player, a number of other places, started to run short, created a little bit of a panic. Card spiked really hard, and as you can imagine, once it spiked hard, that brought a lot of folks out of the woodwork that were willing to sell more copies of it, and now it's coming back down, as you could expect. So this spike was really sharp, it was really fast, and you know there's going to be a backlash. This will continue to come down a little bit, but it's still Chalice of the Void. I mean, still a great card, great sideboard card. It's not going to bottom out or anything like that, but it is going to come down at least closer to where it was prior to the spike. Now, again, if the Pure Steel Paladin decks have a successful weekend, this card could actually spike again as players start to be concerned about sideboarding against that even more so. Or else, if it has a bad weekend, this will continue to dip, maybe even faster. Alright, let's talk about the cards that gained value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Crucible of Worlds, up 209 to 58.79. This is the 5th Dawn version. Now, when you think of this card, typically, maybe its biggest home as far as competitive plays in Vintage and Ravager shops, for example. But, of course, it's a major casual card. I mean, it's fantastic in a lot of Commander decks and cubes, stuff like that. However, it is seeing some modern play now in the Lantern Control deck, which is actually pretty interesting. So this really has converted itself into a modern card as well. And because of that, it is seeing a little bit of an increase this week. Coming in at number 4 is Paradise Mantle, up 220 to 401. Another card that brewers are trying to work into that Pure Steel Paladin deck. I think everyone's trying to find that one thing that's going to push the deck over the top. Maybe this is it. This had a pretty big percentage increase this week. Number 3, Basilisk Collar, up 220 to 11.99. This card is seeing play out of the sideboards of Eldrazi Tron decks in Modern. Now, it's not seeing extensive play. A lot of times it's just a one of in the board. However, it is getting a little bit of a bump because of the popularity of Tron right now. When Gitaxian Probe got banned a few weeks back, it really created an environment that's a little slower and great for mid-range decks. Tron is a perfect counter to mid-range decks, so there is increased interest in cards from those decks right now. Coming in at number 2 is Doubling Season, up 290 to 63.16. This is the Modern Masters version, and this card, you just can't keep it down. I mean, it could even be reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. Nobody cares. They're still buying it. It's just a fantastic casual card. It's amazing in Commander. It works really well if you're lucky enough to get a Breed Lethality deck. This is a great complement to that card, but even if you didn't pick up that product, obviously this card is just amazing in general in Commander, great in cubes, and it does have a small home in Modern. It does see play in Doubling Planeswalkers decks, and I've always said if one of those Doubling Planeswalkers decks ever takes over a tournament, a major tournament, gets into the top 8, this card is going to go through the roof. So it just kind of is what it is with Doubling Season. Coming in at number 1 for the second week in a row, it's Mox Opal, Modern Masters 2015 version, up $2.93 to $53, with the Scars of Mirrodin version up $8.04 to $59.84. So there's increased attention on this card due to Pure Steel Paladin. Obviously, this is a key card to that deck. A lot of people trying to assemble that deck for this weekend. This has spiked pretty hard over the last couple weeks. Whenever you see a big spike, you can expect a pretty big backlash typically, right? This card will eventually start coming back down a little bit. However, there's a few other weird factors with this card. First off, if that deck does well, a lot of people may want to jump on the bandwagon. This card could increase in popularity. On the flip side, if the deck doesn't do well, this card won't bottom out because it's still a huge card, right? It's a huge affinity card. It's great in Legacy. It's great in Vintage. It sees play everywhere. So it's not going to crash really hard or anything like that, but it will probably lose some of the gains it made over the last couple weeks. The other wild card factor out there is Modern Masters 2017. If this is in that set, then again, another influencer that could bring the price down for this a little bit. So this is a high risk card at this point. If you want to pick it up for $59, $55, it could potentially go down a little bit over the next few months. However, again, it's touch and go because if that Pure Steel Paladin deck just completely takes down a tournament, then this card will definitely increase in value. And again, if it doesn't show up in Modern Masters, another indicator that this card could become a really hot card over the next year or so. All right, let's move on to Legacy, and we'll start with the cards that lost value this week. Coming in number 5 is the Archenemy version of Reanimate, down 671 to 1690. Now, this is probably just a weird blip on the radar because somebody listed or sold some of these, maybe a play set for a little bit less than they were listed at before. So it's nothing to read too much into, but I will say this quickly. I do feel like paying $20, $25 for the card is overpriced due to the fact that you can get foil versions from Graveborn for just a little more than that. So yeah, this feels a little bit weird to me, but I think overall, like I said, it's a blip in the radar. I wouldn't read too much into it. Number 4, Underground Sea Revised Edition, down 725 to 330.68. Now, this spiked about a month or two ago pretty nicely, so it's just stabilizing right now. Number 3, The Tabernacle at Pendrevale, down 1362 to 1247.79. This card is just going to sit around that $1,200 mark. Nothing new here. Coming in at number 2, Gauntlet of Might, down 1660 to 166.80. This is the unlimited version. And this card spiked real hard over the last few weeks. So again, it's just stabilizing a little bit. Could have been a target of a buyout, or at least a mini buyout. There was some extra interest in this card recently. I think more so than just people that were picking it up to collect it to put together a set, or even to play old school with or anything like that. I think this was perhaps targeted at least to some capacity. And coming in at number 1 is Nether Void, down 1769 to 272.01. This was a target of a buyout a few months back, and it looks like we're reaching a point now where probably most of those cards have been reintroduced to the market, and the card's kind of back to where it was. All right, let's look at the cards that gained value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Living Plane, up $13.44 to $95. This card was pretty hot a few months back. It just started to climb and climb. I think it was somewhere around $15, $20, and it just went up really fast. It felt like it was a target of a buyout potentially, but it definitely seems to have legs. I mean, it's still going up at this point, so it could be some folks interested in playing it in 93-94 format, or it could just simply be some collectors trying to pick up a lot of the really interesting Legends cards like this one. Coming in at number 4 is Unlimited Wrath of God, up $13.70 to $48.50. These unlimited cards, they spike, they go back down, and I should say in particular, the ones that are actually available in future sets like Revised 4th edition, they have a weird market situation going on. I think partially it's dependent on what's happening with the alpha beta versions of it. I think folks that want to get old versions of some of these cards, if they can't get alpha and beta for a reasonable price that given week, they start looking at unlimited, and then later they try to look to upgrade and perhaps sell off their unlimited to go into a purchase for alpha or beta. I think that's what we see a lot of times because these cards just seem to teeter-totter, like back and forth, and this is a perfect example of that. Stay away from these cards when they're on the upswing like they are now. Coming in number 3, Volcanic Island, up $15.85 to $446.01. I will say Dual Lands is an exception to what I just said, because even though these were in Revised, the unlimited ones are always going to be hot because they're just so sought after. Coming in at number 2 is Moat, up $22.90 to $561.79. This is starting to bounce back a little bit. And I think I said a week or two ago, I kind of expected this to bounce back because it was just losing value so quickly that you knew it would have a rebound week. Well, here's its rebound week. And coming in at number 1, Island of Wak Wak, up $26.05 to $132.46. This is a card that a few months ago I was saying, you might want to pick this one up because it was down to like $25, $50. It was in that price range. And it was just another one of these rare Arabian Nights cards. There was definitely interest around it. We saw some spikes every once in a while, then it would go back down. But since then, this card has really taken off. Now, maybe this is partially a buyout. Maybe some folks have looked at this card and tried to dry up the marketplace. But it's still a card that I think will retain at least a good percentage of this spike. Having said that, that's the Market Watch for this week. So we are going to be back early next week to talk about Modern and what happened after the weekend of Modern Grand Prix and how it affected the market. So we'll have a special edition coming up. Also next week, we'll finish up some of our Modern Masters 2017 speculation by looking at the multicolor cards as well as the colorless cards, which include land, and we'll talk about those. So until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.